We have Cleveland Browns stats predictions for the 2023 NFL season. We're going to go over the offensive side of it, the defensive side of it, and win-loss record to see maybe how it pairs up to what our thoughts are for the 2023 Cleveland Browns. Jeff Lloyd, Pete Smith, your latest Locked On Browns.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound, LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Your host, Jeff Lloyd, at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd. 7 years here now with Locked On Browns, covering your Cleveland Browns. Joined today, Sports Illustrated Browns Digest, Pete Smith. Following, make sure to be at _Pete Smith _ the site. Fantastic. Get a ton of traffic, a lot of content put in, day out. It is not part of your morning rotation. I highly suggest that you do make it part of your daily rotation. To the everydayers who make Locked On Browns their first listen, always appreciate you. Big thanks, obviously, to all the new traffic. Best way to get your Cleveland Browns content here from Locked On Browns is to subscribe to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Notifications on when the content drops. You are there to digest it. Audio side, always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, Pete, we've done shows on this in the past. Now, Mike Clay, ESPN fantasy analyst, been there forever. Mike does a fantastic job. This is always one of my favorites, and it's not even from the fantasy perspective. You know, I mean, my days of fantasy really kind of I ain't got a lot of you way behind me. I just don't get the energy for it. And I think when you do it in this capacity, is covering one team essentially. And then, you have these things come back to bite you. I used to hate, oh my God, like hopefully that player goes down at the 1 yard line so the other guy can score, and just kind of ruin some of my enjoyment of the game over the years. Did enjoy it while I was in it, but not so much anymore. So Pete, we go to this, and we're going to start here on the third segment. We will go to win-loss record. Second segment, we will talk about the defensive output. First segment here, we will obviously go with the offensive output. Now, keep in mind, there is some factoring in here of missed games. So if we're going to talk about Deshaun Watson, Mike has him on pace for 16 games. The running backs, 14 games. The wide receivers, all of them put the potential of missing 2 games. Certainly would not want that. David Njoku, that would be 14. Doesn't do that for the defensive side of the ball. Defensive side of the ball basically bases it all on snap totals. But Pete, first, offensively, quarterback Deshaun Watson, 316 completions, 486 attempts, 3,759 yards, 26 TDs, 11 interceptions on the ground, 485 yards, 4 touchdowns. I would say the first thing for me, Pete, is I think we all believe that this is a 4,000-yard season. Maybe because we have never seen one here, and we're just that much expecting it this year. But I do feel maybe 37-59. But if you do base it on 16 games, if it was 17, you'd probably be right around that 4K mark, though.
Yeah, it's interesting for a couple of reasons. For one, having just looked at it, his completion percentage is projected to be 65%, which outside of last year would be the lowest since his rookie year. He's been 70, 67.3, 68.3. So if he just does that, the yardage from those passes would probably make up the difference. I think the part that probably stands out the most is the rushing yards. Obviously, everybody sort of knows that's going to be a factor, but sort of seeing what that looks like in terms of a stat projection is interesting. 485 rushing yards and 4 extra touchdowns. So you add that in, and it's 4,300 total yards and 30 touchdowns. Obviously, I think his stat line is very Mayfieldian, 2020 era,
or is this maybe a testament to this Stefanski offense too, as well?
Could be, but it's just one of those things where, look, if they go to the playoffs like this, I think people are going to be fine. But ultimately, I don't know if people are going to be overly thrilled with that that number. Look, winning's going to solve a lot, but you want him to look like a franchise quarterback, and these are good, but not great numbers.
Well, I mean, first things first, the yardage feels low. The touchdowns feel low. I think we're all thinking 4,000. I think we're all probably thinking north of 30 touchdowns. The 11 interceptions. Hey, I'm cool with that. But yeah, I mean, and look, I mean, the whole point of this though is you're not supposed to put out everything to be outrageous. Switching over running back wise here, and there's certainly something that stands out right away. For Nick Chubb, 30 receptions. And I do believe, and we've talked about this, that Nick is going to be heavily more involved as a receiver, and maybe heavily is not maybe the correct word, but more than we've been used to. So Nick 1234 on the ground, 30 receptions for about another 275. The one that I do find a little bit impressive here. And look, none of us, we'll hold our breath here. And Pete's line up, well, which one of Jerome Ford's 8 carries in 2022 was the one that was either your favorite or the one that clinched, whether or not you believed in him or you didn't, as far as what he can be. But Pete, it's for, 128 total touches, over 600 yards, contributing, with 4 touchdowns. If this is what the Browns can get out of him, then not addressing it to this point probably would, be the answer of, okay, if you told me it's 128 touches, over 600 yards, and he finds a way to be an able contributor, then yeah, I guess the talk of him and whether or not he was ready to be the second running back is legit.
So yeah, the thing that jumps out is I think Nick Chubb's receiving yardage total is low, and obviously, look, he hasn't projected to miss 3 games, but I do think that he's just going to get the ball more at catcher with some more space to run. Jerome Ford's overall yardage is okay. His yards per touch based on this is 4.7, close to 4.8. Not great. But he's a complete mystery. And, if the Browns don't do anything and Jerome Ford is just average, that's probably about right. Are people going to be happy with that number? No, they're not, because then we're going to get this situation, especially based on this. Chubb is missing time.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be, you're going to be sitting here either listening to people complain about Chubb needs 50 carries or that they just don't have enough there. So, I don't know what the Clay is supposed to go off of with Ford. So you get some numbers, they're interesting, but overall not particularly not particularly good when you go just his yards per touch.
No doubt. And this is for me, I don't know. I mean, just for me, probably feels a little low. And we'll start. I mean, we'll just go with the trio wide receiver: Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Amari, and keep in mind, all these are all based on each of them playing 15 games. Hopefully, obviously, they'll play 17, ideally. Amari for 71, 960 and change, 7 touchdowns. Elijah Moore, 45 for 627 and 4. I honestly feel that reception total is going to be higher. Donovan, 42, 556 and 3. And the way I'm reading this, Pete, I know Amari had 9 last year. I forget Donovan's exact number, but this puts them for their top 3 wide receivers, only 14 touchdown receptions in the 2023 season.
Yeah, the number for Donovan Peoples-Jones is 3, which is exactly the number of touchdown receptions he had last year.
Okay,
because it just worked out that way. And yes, Amari Cooper got the lion's share of that, and you still have Njoku, who has 5 on this.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a couple weeks ago about 2,500 being the target for the top 3. They don't get there. It's not even close. It is interesting that they project Elijah Moore to be the solid number 2 option in this offense. There's just so many
layups that'll be there for Elijah Moore. So many gimmies.
Well, that certainly seems to be what OTAs suggest that they're trying to do. The flip side of that is I think Elijah Moore may get more receptions for a lower average, whereas DPJ and potentially Njoku may get larger receptions, per yardage per reception. Like they may catch passes a little bit deeper down the field, but the way this works out is it's a very everybody gets fed type look. So after Amari Cooper, it's 3 guys, all basically the open man gets the ball, which ultimately is sort of what we're going for, but obviously, wanting more just overall production out of that group.
No doubt. And, look, I feel higher. I hope higher. Okay. Because these numbers right now, and we'll get to the win projection total here, but these numbers right now, it doesn't necessarily wet the whistle so much for me. We're going to switch it up here. We're going to go to the defensive side of the ball here, go through, Mike's projections there as far as obviously all the new talent brought in this year for the Cleveland Browns. Jeff Lloyd, Pete Smith, your latest Locked On Browns. Make a fast break over to FanDuel during the NBA Finals, because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Look, FanDuel, they got promotions every day. The app is safe, secure, and easy to navigate. You get your money back instantly. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Again, as always, appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. To all the everydayers out there, to all the new traffic, be more like the everydayers, and make sure you're subscribed to the Locked On Browns YouTube page. Notifications on, so when the content drops, you guys are there to absorb it all. Pete, as we switch through here and continue Mike Clay's 2023 Cleveland Browns projections, we flip it up. We go to the defensive side of the ball here. Obviously, the first name everybody wants to look at, and certainly a possibility. And I know ESPN, there was an article out the other day. I believe it was ESPN, top 100 NFL predictions for the 2023 season. They had Myles Garrett taking home the NFL Defensive Player of the Year. Myles Garrett figured here for 13 sacks on the season. But Pete, this is where you start to see some better numbers around him. A little north of 8 sacks for Zadarius Smith. Ogbonnaya Okoronkwo, 4.5. I think that number is going to be higher. Dalvin Tomlinson. And Pete, it's just crazy to see a sack total number, just even sack numbers, next to somebody listed as a defensive tackle for the Cleveland Browns.
Okay, so yeah, it was Connor or SI that did that top.
It was SI, that's right.
But
Pete would know.
Yeah, the thing that jumps out to me here is Okoronkwo's snap total. It's low, and I think we've talked about this. I think the Browns are going to do everything they can to sub-package him onto the field as much as possible.
But also the other thing is, you look at Garrett, you look at Zadarius, you look at Okoronkwo. Who's the one you're trying to make sure you can preserve and get the maximum out of? And it's got to be Zadarius Smith.
Yeah, I mean, again, he's got 700 snaps, but that's what I'm looking at. I see 432 snaps, which is pretty consistent with what he's had going back to Houston. But the Browns didn't pay him the money they did to not use him more than that. Meanwhile, he's got a lot of snaps at defensive tackle, which I think the Browns are going to try to use less of. But who knows? I mean, he projecting 432 more snaps than I think Perrion Winfrey's going to get this year, because I got him at 0. But yeah, look, the sack total is interesting for the defensive ends. Zadarius Smith, 8.1. You're sitting there going, well, he averages at least 10 as long as he's on the field. So the edge production's kind of low, or I should say not low, but conservative, I suppose. And then the defensive tackle sack production is the same. It still just doesn't give you a lot of good feelings about that group. It continues to be a massive question mark. So when you look at it, you're sitting there going, well, the defensive tackle group as a whole is going to have, I think that says 9.5 sacks, Tomlinson for 3, Jordan Elliott for 2.3, and then various shades of 1 with Tommy Togiai coming in with a 0.2 sack is going to be huge for this team. That's going to put him over the top. So
we're going to start contract extension talks.
So, it just amplifies the questions that you and I continue to have with this defense. Is that enough? These numbers to me continue to confirm the answer is no.
Mm-hmm. And the first thing I look at, Pete, is, if all this work was done, and look, unless Jordan Elliott and Jim Schwartz, take to each other like peanut butter and jelly. If you tell me Jordan Elliott is taking the second most snaps at the defensive tackle position and it's 561, I think we're all going to be like, oh boy.
Look, I mean, Jordan Elliott is the guy who crushed it all last offseason and had a great camp.
Best shape of his life.
Best summer. And then he came in and played well for one game. And what are we hearing right now? Jordan Elliott's having a great OTAs or whatever, according to Jim Schwartz. And he said the same thing about Alex Wright. I'm not suggesting he's not. I'm just saying, please do something on the field that says you're good, because you're year 4 and I'm still waiting for you to be an NFL football player. He's flashed at times, but that just illustrates the problem for me. And again, he's going off the past in a lot of ways here, but like Dalvin Tomlinson, yeah, lots of snaps. Jordan Elliott followed by Perion Winfrey. That's not where I want to be. It's just not. And like, people can try to tell me this is going to be like Hiram is somewhere screaming that Jordan Elliott's the next coming of something. Chad Thomas or some other great that could have been if only the team stuck with him another 10 years. It just leaves me wanting more.
Well, and it's great that you brought up Chad Thomas. I mean, it was Memorial Day weekend in South Beach. I'm sure Chad Thomas had to be spinning some hits somewhere in Miami, maybe the Fountain Blue. Who knows? If you saw Chad Thomas and you were in Miami for spring break, I mean, for Memorial Day weekend, I'm sure you saw it. One thing that does stand out here is our guy Mike Clay seems to be a very, very large fan of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, figuring that this might be the year that it all comes together. 117 total tackles, 1 sack, figuring in for probably 1 interception here. The rest of the linebacker room, and I think this is one thing, and this is something everybody knows Pete and I talk about, is I see here that maybe there's going to be less and less snaps overall for the linebackers, Pete, which is what we're trying to do here.
Well, I don't know if anything on the stat line for these linebackers suggests they had a good year, because you just go off tackles, which is ultimately the job. But it's 2 interceptions or 2 sacks and 1.5 interceptions between your top 2 guys. I don't know what to make of this. All I can say is that Anthony Walker was really good for 3 games and has been sort of boned for 2 years here. And all of a sudden the defense is more suited to help him play well. Like I think him sticking it out may work out for him really well, and that the defense is going to be better, allows him to do things. I think JOK is going to look a lot more like 2021 JOK, and hopefully better, continuing to grow. And then after that, I mean, he's projecting 432 snaps for Jacob Phillips, who may or may not be on the team. He's got way less snaps for Taki, who, as long as he's healthy, and that may be why he's got this, if he projects him to like miss
first 5-6 weeks,
then yeah, you can sort of see that. But just based on what we've seen, the team really likes Taki, and there's certain matchups where he's going to play a whole lot of snaps. So who knows? And then Matt Adams for 54 great snaps. Another guy who I don't think is guaranteed a roster spot on this group. But yeah, look, this is what I want. Less linebacker snaps overall, other than your top 2 guys, and then cobble together whatever your 3rd guy is out of that group, and you're fine. But the goal is to get more and more snaps out of your premium dudes where you've spent all your resources. And between the defensive line, which obviously we've talked about, has some questions, DBs, they got all kinds of snaps.
No doubt. And with Matthew Adams, in 54 snaps, I mean, obviously you could say Matthew Adams, or you could, put in parentheses Jordan Kunasek. I guess it would be take your choice at that point. I do love the Jacob Phillips love. Maybe, this is the year, sticks together, maybe. Whatever.
Defense might be better suited for what he does well, but he's got to figure it out quick.
And the other thing is you got to stay in the damn field. I mean, that's just simple. Secondary, Greg Newsome, Denzel.
100% true.
Yes. Greg Newsome, Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson it's interesting because, if you tell me the way you're averaging it out that, Martin Emerson is going to have 270 less snaps than Greg Newsome and Denzel Ward, I'm not sure how that all works out. But you have, Greg Newsome, and I mean, that's a lot of tackles for Denzel Ward. You have Greg Newsome figured for 56, a sack, Lovely for Greg Newsome. And for a man who does not have an NFL interception, getting his first NFL interception, Denzel Ward, 69 tackles. That does feel high. I'm not going to lie. 0.4, half a sack, 2.5 interceptions. The interceptions actually feels low for what the Jim Schwartz defense should do. Martin Emerson, 57 tackles, but Martin Emerson possibly with 2 interceptions on the year. And for Juan Thornhill, 73 tackles, somewhere between 2.5, 3 interceptions. The interception number feels low. Grant Delpit, 94 tackles, half a sack, 2.5 interceptions. That's kind of been right around where Grant Delpit has been, as he's been a second half starter the last 2 years. But Pete, the secondary numbers.
Well, let's start here. Denzel Ward has never played that many snaps in a season. Not even close. So that's
and right now he would have all the more reason to take an extra week if he was banged up.
Yeah, I mean, so that's where the tackle and numbers look high because he's on the field more than he's ever been in this simulation. But look, I mean, the Browns are going to play a ton of man coverage. They're going to have to make tackles in space. They're going to have to do some of those things well. And then the flip side of that is Grant Delpit and Juan Thornhill, seemingly based on this, all 3 of them. Ward is apparently going to play every snap this year, which would be great, as are Juan Thornhill and Grant Delpit. And for the most part, those guys have been able to play a whole lot of snaps over the course of this year. And then Rodney McLeod plays a modest number, about half as many. That's another one where, even listening to Jim Schwartz talk about the DB usage, they're going to play around with that. It sounds like Rodney McLeod and Grant Delpit are going to do a lot of the same things. And then depending on the situation, they're going to pick the guy for the specific matchup, for a role, for a given week. But other than that, I mean, look, these are your dudes. You've got the top 3 corners, your top 3 safeties. These are the guys that need to have a big year. And with everything in front on the defensive line, they very well could do that. I don't know where, what I'd have to look to see where the Browns are in interceptions year to year, but overall for the season, that's 14.
Yep.
I don't, and if you're a heavy man coverage team, you're probably not going to have as many, but then again, if you're able to generate a ton of pressure,
bingo,
then you may be in good shape to cause some more of those mistakes. So, these defensive stats are really difficult to sort of read in terms of like how good of a season they've had, because it doesn't tell, there's no, it's interesting that there's no pass breakup stat.
True.
Which, would seemingly be the big thing if you're a man coverage team. It's all tackles, interceptions, and sacks. But it's certainly good to know that the combination of safeties will have 1 sack on the season. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, I cannot wait to celebrate that. Just a couple interesting things that stand out to me. Greg Newsome, and obviously all the talk that there kind of was projected to have the highest snap total for the Cleveland Browns. Also, DeAnthony Bell on this roster over maybe a Ronnie Hickman or somebody else. Very, very interesting with that as well. We're going to get to, schedule, overall win total. Jeff Lloyd, Pete Smith, your latest Locked On Browns. Again, to the everyday listeners, you guys, look, I mean, whether it's this show, whether it's any show we do here on the Locked On Podcast Network, you have to start from somewhere, and then you get your growth, and then the word gets out, obviously. But to everybody who's been an everyday or here to Locked On Browns and any show that you love on the Locked On Podcast Network, we appreciate you guys. And, for any of the new traffic, what you got here through the draft, you got here through free agency, you got here through the Zadarius Smith deal. Best way is to make sure you're subscribed to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Notifications on, audio-wise, always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, segment 3, and Pete, we talked just before we basically hit the button here on record. Mike Clay, again, now we're basing these numbers off of Mike Clay's articles, and he does this for all 32 NFL teams, puts out an article of projections. And look, a lot of it does have a fantasy perspective to it, but it does make for a fun talking point episode. That's why we've always done this. He has, Pete, the Cleveland Browns as a project wins of 9.8. There are some interesting ones here because he did do each game individually. He would essentially have the Browns starting 0-2. He has the Browns he actually still has them starting 1-3, but starting 1-3. So if it's 1-3, I guess I tell you what, based on some of these numbers, the 1-3 isn't all that unheralded. But if the Browns were to start 1-2 at home and then lose in week 2 to the Pittsburgh Steelers, that certainly would not be. But the thing that does kind of surprise me, and maybe it's because nobody knows what's going on with the San Francisco 49ers at the quarterback position, is he has them after starting 1-3, coming off the bye and finding a way to beat the San Francisco 49ers at home.
Yeah. Look, I think 9.8 wins, I've seen 10 a lot of places. That's enough to get into the postseason. I am conflicted on how you get to the Steelers being a 49% chance to win just because they're at home. Look, maybe they're going to be better. Matt Canada is still the offensive coordinator of that team. Whatever. 1-3 is going to be tough though. If they were to go 1-3,
if it's 1-3, this is not going to be Pete. We're not going to have a lot of fun doing content covering this team.
No, it'll be all about firing the head coach and all that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Is Jim Schwartz ready to take over as an interim head coach?
Right. But look, the one thing that we sort of talked about when we broke down the schedule a little bit is, one, if Deshaun Watson doesn't come out like swinging real fast, it could be trouble. But if you come off the bye week strong, and obviously some of this is based on the fact the 49ers don't know who their quarterback is. The Browns had their bye week, and the 49ers are traveling to Cleveland. This schedule lines up in a way that sort of like allows the Browns to go on a big run. And at one point, they pick on a bunch of like drag football teams. Although one of them, he has the Browns winning big, seemingly, is against Jacksonville. And the Browns go on like a 6-game winning streak and win, I think, 8 of 10. So look, and that would be not unlike what the Bengals did last year, where they started out slow and then just charged and made a big run. Like, I think that's a reasonable. I think that's a reasonable expectation to have. That I should say, at least the opportunity is there for them to do that, but they can't put themselves in a big hole and expect themselves to be able to just drag themselves out. But we talked about, if they can get through the tough part of the schedule, if they can sort of come together as a team and figure it out, they could be a very difficult team to play down the stretch. They could go on a big run, and they could be a pain in the ass again in the playoffs. Is that what I said? 37% chance to win the last game of the season in Cincinnati?
Yes, sir. And here's the other thing. And this is, and now number one, this will, based on the way Mike has this would make or break the Cleveland Browns season. Is he has them 1-5 in the North. So they go, no, but even still though, Pete, if you change that to 2-4, that almost gets you to your 11 wins, which may get you in the wild card. You get to 3-3, it gets you to your 12 wins. But if you don't make the playoffs and you go 1-5 in the North, Kevin Stefanski, I love you. I have zero issue with Coach Stefanski, but I'm not sure it would be able to go on if it was 1-5 in the North and didn't make the playoffs.
And I just don't see how that happens. The Browns
the Bengals, look, even last year, it's not like you saw, because that Thursday night game, you thoroughly dominated that Bengal team. Yes, and if Deshaun Watson and things that, if you had played Jacoby Brissett in the second Bengal game, you may have had a better shot. The Bengals, and I'm not knocking the Bengals. They are a really good team. They just do not match up well with the Cleveland Browns.
Correct. And look, I mean, that's the thing, is like, you look at what the Browns have defensively, it goes well against what the Bengals like to do. Unless the Bengals are just determined to run the ball over and over and over again and do it successfully, they're going to throw, and they're going to throw a lot, which is going to give the Browns plenty of time to rush the passer. And if their guys are effective, they're going to get to Burrow. And the Browns have really good corners, which is why Burrow's record against the Browns is what it is. The Browns defense has been able to be successful in stifling the Bengals offense. But overall, look, the Browns went 3-3 in the division last year. Certainly 2-4 is not unreasonable, but it just the way the division is right now, it just screams splitting every season series.
Yep.
With your opponent, which is exactly what happened last year. Every team in the division, the Browns went 1-1 against. which is about right because
Yep.
it's just a sort of a rock, paper, scissor type matchup game with them. And everybody's like good at certain things, but divisional football games are different. And, it's a projection. It's whatever. Like a machine popped this thing out, but it doesn't take into account those things of the familiarity and everything else. And I think the Browns do better against the division than this suggests. But I also I'm looking at that Jacksonville game and going, I think Jacksonville is going to be better than this simulation had. The 49ers are going to be tough.
Well, the first thing I look at with the Jacksonville game is, and even though it is week 14, if you think it's going to be that much of a difference, Mother Nature better have to play a factor. Like the Jacksonville Jaguars are a good football team. We'll see what Calvin Ridley gives to them, but the Jacksonville Jaguars are a good football team. And
apparently the Tennessee Titans are just dead because the Browns apparently are going to just run through them. But that's another thing. I think the Titans will be a tougher opponent than this. But yeah, look, they can't. 1-3 would be a very difficult slog way to start the season. I think they have to do better than that. But like I said, it is what it is. Like it does. You can't account for the sort of ups and downs of the season and some of